facilitators to do their reporting out. This was a topic that really caused us to think. The series of this week's events, as we followed the life of John Lewis and understood not only the name and the position that he held, but who he was from the time he was born until the time he died. If we could all be so lucky as to really follow a straight line in terms of who we are. It is a challenge because there are so many layers that make up the identity, right? We have relational identity, we have social identity, we have cultural identity. Who we are sometimes depends on where we are, who we're sitting with, what we're feeling. But what we have found in this time is that we have to understand first and foremost who we really are, not just who people think we are, nor what people say about us when we leave the room. Whoever we are, we need to be committed in darkness as well as in full light. Whoever we are, we need to be the same person in times of comfort and discomfort. Whoever we are, we need to understand the power that we have and to celebrate the potential of that power. I am African American, I am female, I am Jamaican, I am a mother, I'm a business professional, I'm a nonprofit leader, I'm a coach, but I'm also invisible at times. I'm also hesitant to speak. I've also been the victim of racial bias. I have had the doors closed in my face, and I have been asked to be reassigned because of the color of my skin. But one thing that I know is I add value. I know that regardless of how people see me, I add value. And it's when you are actually able to be comfortable with who you are, regardless of circumstance, that's when you're able to function. We are living in a very imperfect environment. And what happens is when our identity shifts to meet the situation, we get lost in the translation. Identity is fluid. That's a fact. Identity is also only happening mostly in a transformative moment when you have that aha moment and you've said to yourself, I'm not going to do that because I know who I am, or I can do that because I know who I am. So I applaud all of us today because it takes a lot of courage to step into the identity that you see when you look in the mirror. If you're comfortable with what you see when you look in the mirror, then you know who you are. We have to understand this dual citizenship that we have with the world. We all have it because we are different people. But the value that we have in bringing ourselves together and using our identity to be true to who we are will help us get to the next level. As I close this commentary piece, I don't know if many of you have seen the op-ed written and published on behalf of John Lewis in the New York Times. It says, "Together you can redeem the soul of our nation." And he basically says, you must do something. Democracy is not a state, it's an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And so I challenge all of us to take on that good fight, standing in who we know we are, And if you're still trying to find that identity, it's okay. It's a journey, but just know that when you find it, you will know who you are. And so as we call on our friends to report out, I'm going to start with Dr. Clifton. And I'm going to ask Dr. Clifton if he could share just the conversation that took place in his breakout room with the rest of us.
Yes, I think our group started off with leading and talking about Peter's journey to the aha of accepting who he is, not worrying about what people think, and that's sort of a magnificent journey. And everyone was really forthright in our group about sharing, you know, the search of becoming who we are. Maybe it's lifelong, but we had everyone, you know, had a cultural. There were three people who had two different cultures, you know, and there was always, you know, you're not black enough, you're not white enough, you're not, you know, Mexican enough, you're not white enough, and it, you know, and that tension has caused them to really question that and be uncomfortable. But it seemed to really process the the struggle to become who you are, which is, and you know, and when we who we are, then we have empathy pounding in our hearts. You know, one of the persons in the group was, you know, is a scientist, and oftentimes at his university or his college, you know, he claims being mistaken for the cleaning guy, you know, that's, you know, and he can just go with it, you know, and he's not collapsing, and it just seems to make him stronger, and he's having great dialogue. So I think we're all sharing these contradictions, these oppositions, and everyone seemed to be growing from them, and particularly in light of this last, 5-6 months. So it was again a privilege and a pleasure to be a facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for sharing that. Marie Faley. Are you able to? Excellent.
Very, very interesting. The whole topic, the whole question of identity, it is. I mean, many people mentioned that it depends on where you are and who you're with, and sometimes it's very necessary to conform to the environment that you're in order to navigate through the situation. But it was Prabha who said, but my identity is my soul. It's who I really am. And I know it's knowing who I am and then being able to speak from that strength rather than really vacillating. You can wear a different hat. You can wear the hat of scientist. You can wear the hat of mother. You can wear the hat of teacher. And you're all of those things. But bottom line is that you have to know who you are inside to be very strong within the community. And that means just not arguing with someone, but just knowing, being very strong and able to create a sense of community and to communicate with others and to be open to communicate with others with different beliefs. And that's for me most difficult, but it was a really, really wonderful group. And I thank Melanie for bringing me into this. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Mike?
Thanks, Natalie. Our group had a wonderful conversation about the impact of identity, how when it's imposed upon us, it can be reductive and exclude us from conversations we'd like to be a part of, but it can also include us in conversations we never signed up for. We talked about how it shifts in contexts that, much like has already been spoken to, but some of the really beautiful things that came out of our conversation were really around the accountability when we focused the last 5 minutes on how are we going to manage ownership of our identity in the future. And it was said beautifully that if we take responsibility for how we love ourselves, then we can love others. And that it's hurt people who hurt people. And if we can be okay with ourselves, then we can look at other people and see people, not places. And that another beautiful idea that came out of our conversation was that how you treat others can be your identity. And we talked about the importance of listening and not making those assumptions, knowing yourself, and then when you see someone, catching yourself and not falling into that heuristic or mental shortcut of assuming that characteristics are going to come with who you see, and just listening. Know yourself, listen, see people, not places, and let our identity be how we treat other people. And I want to thank the group. They were amazing.
So important, real gems there. I love that accountability, take responsibility, but hurt people, this vicious cycle that can continue if we fall into that trap. So important. So thank you so much for sharing. Dion, do you want to share out?
Sure. We had a very interesting group, a lot of business owners, personal business owners, and then a professor from Suffolk Community College. And so we talked about how they were identifying themselves. Some did it by race, gender, and what was interesting, barriers came up that kind of made them step back. Barriers that stopped them from being protected. And so the group felt that there was a need for a multi-coalition, a multicultural coalition, in order to have some type of protection and alliance and to build strength so that they'd feel comfortable in their identities. Some were identifying based on their relationships, which was interesting. The different relationships they've had, the experiences that they've had. As far as shifting, you know, we spoke about Hulu and how certain segments were taken off with the Golden Girls based on blackface, and that instead of taking certain things off or removing these periods of adversity and trials, that perhaps we should use them as educational moments and aha moments, which there appears that a lot of people in our group were having aha moments during this pandemic period. When we looked at how it's impacted and how we're being identified by other people, fear came about, which was interesting. Fear of identifying, because you'd be hurt in some shape or form or way. But then how do you deal with that? And the group spoke to the fact of not letting it be a brain drain for people, but by looking at them for who and what they may be, because someone who is accepting of all identities is someone who can expand their cultural and diverse lens and has had experience and is open to experiences and sharing their own. And so those who haven't, some of the group members felt that they look at them as inferior, especially certain groups such as white supremacist groups. Instead of them projecting a sense of power, other individuals looked at them as being inferior because they're limited in their ability, in their experiences. And so the group came forth with the notion that we need to stay grounded to combat these fears and to have strength with one another and diversity.
Wow, that's great. That fear is real, that fear of being exposed. But great point, there's a lot going on. And from all of the lenses of people around the world or in our communities, they don't understand why statues are being taken down, why things are being, because they don't have that perspective. So truly teachable moments. And I will just share that within our group, we had people struggling with these dual personalities and layers. We had, though, those transformative moments where the bubble bursts, right? Whether you were in a situation and you realized you were part of a mob action and you were so disappointed in yourself that you were reduced to tears, or you were having a very meaningful personal interaction with a group of people who saw you as this tower of strength, this business professional, get it done, no nonsense. But when you discuss some vulnerability or concern, the reaction that you got was so disappointing. But it was a revelation that, I at some point have to step out of the shadow of trying to be something or someone to fit into situations where we had someone who, because of his background as a child and moving around, that survival mode was constantly reinventing yourself to fit into a situation. So there was a constant change of identity to fit in. And it's exhausting after a while for you to always be the one shifting and moving. Whether you were in another country and were always protected in this bubble because it was very homogeneous and everyone was the same, but you traveled outside of the country or left this group, and all of a sudden it was a very different world. Our reality is that we are in a different world, and we have not understood the world the way it has come to be. We've accepted things. We discussed in our group that communication is key to influence change. And that's why the groups like this and times like this are so important. First, the conversation, which then should lead to the self-examination of who we are, what we do. Are we what we say we are? Are we who we say we are? Do we do what we say we do? Now is the time to really challenge ourselves. We're on a new path to be authentic, to be vulnerable, and to have people remember or realize that I am the same person you invited to the meeting. I am the same person who contributed to the project with you. I am the same person who lives next door to you, but I have an opinion and it's different. It's not the lens that you have used. You've not encountered what I've encountered, but I am important and I bring value. So I think that kind of sums up everything. I want to thank all of the facilitators for pulling in those very important streams of feedback so that we can really just get a very great, we've had good food. This is a good meal that we've had together to just understand what and learn what we need to learn, because I think that's true. Every time we come together, we learn what we need to learn. And although we're physically distant, we're inspirationally connected. So Nalini, I turn it back over to you. Thank you.